Money has a strange way of changing people. For many, wealth becomes something to display: a larger house, a rarer watch, a luxury car that announces success long before its owner speaks. Society often teaches us that the richer someone becomes, the further they drift from ordinary life. Yet history repeatedly tells a different story. Some of the world's wealthiest individuals chose a path that seems almost impossible to imagine. Even after building fortunes worth billions of dollars, they continued to wear inexpensive clothes, eat simple meals, ride public transportation, and live with a discipline that looked unchanged from the days when they had almost nothing. This is not a story about rejecting wealth or pretending that money has no value. Every person in this documentary understood the power of money because each of them spent years living without it. Before they became industrialists, technology pioneers, or business legends, many experienced poverty, manual labor, war, political upheaval, or personal hardship. Those experiences shaped habits that extraordinary success never erased. Their fortunes grew larger, but their daily routines often remained remarkably ordinary. As we explore these stories, you'll notice something unexpected. Each billionaire found a different reason to remain frugal. For one, it was discipline. For another, it was leadership. For someone else, it became a philosophy of stewardship and generosity. Although their businesses transformed industries and created enormous wealth, the values that guided their personal lives often remained rooted in lessons learned long before success arrived. So rather than asking why these billionaires refused to spend more, perhaps the better question is this: what did they understand about wealth that so many people never do? Let's begin with a man who built one of China's largest beverage empires, yet continued to live as though every dollar still deserved to be earned. Chapter 1: Zong Qinghou, the billionaire who never forgot the price of a dollar. Imagine building a business worth billions of dollars and still living as though every expense deserved careful thought. For Zong Qinghou, extraordinary wealth never became permission to live extravagantly. At one point, his fortune was estimated at nearly $16 billion, placing him among the wealthiest entrepreneurs in China. Yet his personal spending remained astonishingly modest. Reports described him limiting his annual personal expenses to less than 50,000 yuan, or roughly $7,300 a year. While many executives at similar levels surrounded themselves with luxury, Zong quietly continued living with habits that reflected discipline rather than display. That discipline could be seen in the smallest details of his everyday life. He became known for wearing simple black cloth shoes that cost only a few dollars. Haircuts were inexpensive and practical. Instead of dining in exclusive restaurants or entertaining clients in lavish settings, he often ate an ordinary boxed lunch at his office desk. Employees frequently remarked that there was little about his appearance that distinguished him from thousands of other workers arriving at the office each morning. If someone unfamiliar with his identity walked past him in the hallway, they might never imagine they were looking at one of the richest businessmen in Asia. One incident captured this philosophy perfectly. In 2016, another passenger photographed Zong riding in the second-class carriage of a high-speed train. His staff had arranged first-class accommodations, but he declined the upgrade. Instead, he chose to travel alongside the rest of his team. During the journey, witnesses described him chatting comfortably with fellow passengers and even sharing snacks with a young child. There were no visible bodyguards creating distance, no attempt to project status, and no expectation of special treatment. To everyone around him, he appeared to be another traveler simply making his way home. To understand why this mattered, it helps to look far beyond his success. Long before Wahaha became China's beverage giant, Zong spent years performing physically demanding labor in rural communes. Unlike many entrepreneurs who began young, he did not start his business until he was 42 years old. In the company's earliest days, he personally delivered soft drinks and popsicles to local schools using nothing more than a tricycle. Every sale represented hard work, persistence, and uncertainty. Wealth eventually transformed the size of his business, but it never erased the habits formed during those difficult years. Perhaps that is why his story continues to resonate long after the numbers attached to his fortune have faded from memory. Expensive possessions can signal success, but they rarely reveal character. Zong Qinghou demonstrated something quieter. He showed that discipline does not have to disappear when prosperity arrives. Sometimes the habits that build a fortune are the very habits that allow a person to remain grounded after achieving it. His legacy is not simply the company he built, but the reminder that true wealth does not always announce itself through luxury. Sometimes it quietly rides in second class, wearing cloth shoes, content with having enough. Chapter 2, Liu Yonghao, the billionaire who still lives like a farmer. If Zong Qinghou demonstrated that discipline can survive extraordinary success, Liu Yonghao offers a different lesson. His story is not simply about spending less. It is about refusing to let wealth replace the habits that created it. Today, Liu is known as the founder of the New Hope Group, one of China's largest agricultural companies, with a fortune measured in the billions. Yet despite his financial success, he continues to live with a simplicity that often surprises those who meet him. He is frequently called China's richest chicken farmer, a nickname that reflects not only the industry that made his fortune, but also the mindset that never left him. The details of his daily life reveal just how little success changed his personal routine. Rather than visiting exclusive salons or hiring private stylists, Liu has long preferred inexpensive neighborhood barbers, paying little more than $1 for a haircut. Designer wardrobes never became part of his identity. Comfortable t-shirts often replaced tailored business suits. Even when traveling, he became known for flying economy and searching for discounted airline tickets with the same care that many families use when planning a vacation. For someone whose wealth could easily afford every luxury imaginable, these choices were never about what he could buy. They reflected what he believed was worth buying. Perhaps the most revealing habit is found not in an office or an airport, but in his own backyard. Liu enjoys growing vegetables at his homes in Beijing and Chengdu, tending small gardens filled with chilies and cucumbers. To an outsider, it may seem almost humorous. Here is a man who could purchase entire farms without hesitation, choosing instead to spend time cultivating a modest vegetable patch with his own hands. Yet for Liu, the garden is not a hobby designed to appear humble. It is a quiet reminder of where his journey began and of the value of producing something through patience and work rather than simply purchasing it. Those habits become easier to understand when viewed against the backdrop of his early life. During the Cultural Revolution, Liu was sent to work in the countryside, where he spent years performing physically exhausting labor under extremely difficult conditions. He worked barefoot in the fields, carried heavy loads of fertilizer, and lived through periods when food itself was scarce. Those experiences left a lasting impression. Hardship has a way of changing how a person measures value. Someone who has known scarcity often develops an appreciation for resources that cannot be learned from books or business schools. When Liu and his brothers finally had the opportunity to start a business in 1982, they began with almost nothing. Their first venture was remarkably modest, raising chickens and quail on the balcony of their apartment. Few could have imagined that such humble beginnings would eventually grow into one of the largest agricultural enterprises in China. Yet Liu has often credited those early years of necessity with teaching lessons that remained essential even after success arrived. Every expense mattered. Every improvement required effort. Every setback demanded creativity rather than excess spending. The discipline that began on an apartment balcony would eventually become part of the company's culture and one of the foundations of its long-term growth. Looking back, it becomes clear that Liu Yonghao's frugality is not rooted in fear of spending money. It is rooted in respect, for work, for resources, and for the opportunities that careful stewardship can create. His modest haircut, his economy flights, and even his vegetable garden all point toward the same principle: success does not require abandoning the values that built it. In many ways, his life suggests that true prosperity is not measured by how much comfort a person can purchase, but by how firmly they remain connected to the discipline that made success possible in the first place. Chapter 3, Ren Zhengfei, the founder who never stopped standing in line. Success often changes how people move through the world. As wealth grows, ordinary inconveniences begin to disappear. Private drivers replace public transportation. Executive dining rooms replace crowded cafeterias. Security teams create distance between leaders and everyone else. Yet Ren Zhengfei, the founder of Huawei, spent decades demonstrating a remarkably different philosophy. Despite building one of the world's largest telecommunications companies, he continued to embrace routines that most people would never associate with a billionaire. To Ren, leadership was not measured by the privileges a position could provide, but by the example a leader was willing to set. That philosophy became visible to millions in 2016, when a photograph began circulating across Chinese social media. Rather than stepping into a waiting limousine or being escorted through a private entrance, Ren was seen standing alone in the taxi queue at Shanghai Hongqiao Airport. It was late at night. He waited patiently for his turn, just like every other traveler. There was no attempt to attract attention. In fact, the photograph became famous precisely because someone else noticed him, not because he wanted to be noticed. For many people, the image challenged their assumptions about what extraordinary wealth is supposed to look like. The airport photograph was not an isolated moment. Those who worked alongside Ren often described similar habits throughout his career. During business trips, he frequently chose the subway instead of private transportation. At Huawei's headquarters, he lined up in the employee cafeteria carrying his own tray alongside newly hired engineers and longtime staff members alike. There were no executive dining rooms reserved for senior leadership, no expectation that ordinary rules should no longer apply to him. These decisions were small in isolation, yet together they communicated something powerful. They reminded employees that no individual, regardless of title, stood above the culture the company expected everyone else to uphold. Ren's approach did not emerge by accident. He was born in 1944 in Guizhou Province, one of the poorest regions in China, into a family of 9 supported by 2 school teachers. Resources were limited, and opportunities were earned through persistence rather than privilege. Before entering the business world, he spent years serving as an engineer in the military, where discipline, structure, and collective responsibility shaped daily life. Those experiences left a lasting impression. Even after Huawei became a global technology leader, the habits formed during those earlier years remained deeply woven into the way Ren approached leadership and decision-making. Perhaps the most revealing insight into his leadership came from his own description of his role within Huawei. Rather than portraying himself as the visionary at the center of every achievement, Ren once compared his job to holding a bucket of glue. His responsibility, he explained, was to keep more than 180,000 employees connected as one cohesive organization. It is a remarkably humble description for someone who built one of the most influential technology companies in the world. Instead of placing himself above the company, he saw his greatest contribution as strengthening the bonds between the people who made its success possible. There is an important distinction hidden within Ren Zhengfei's story. His habits were never simply about saving money. Standing in line, riding the subway, or eating in the employee cafeteria did little to change his personal finances. Instead, these choices reinforced a principle that many organizations struggle to achieve: credibility. Employees are far more likely to believe in a leader whose actions consistently reflect the values they ask others to practice. Ren understood that respect cannot be demanded through authority alone. It is earned through consistency. By continuing to live many of the same ordinary routines as the people around him, he demonstrated that leadership begins not with privilege, but with example. Chapter 4, Lei Jun, When Humility Becomes Part of the Brand. Not every story in this documentary ends with quiet admiration. Sometimes the pursuit of authenticity raises a more complicated question. Can humility remain genuine once millions of people are watching? Few stories illustrate that tension better than that of Lei Jun, the founder and CEO of Xiaomi. Unlike the others we've met, Lei's chapter is not simply about living modestly. It invites us to examine the fine line between authentic simplicity and public image, especially in an era where every moment can become content. In 2026, Lei Jun shared what appeared to be an ordinary morning. Sitting on a small plastic stool along a sidewalk in Wuhan, he enjoyed one of the city's most familiar breakfasts: hot dry noodles, fried dough, and tofu skin. The meal cost only about 11 yuan, or roughly $1.50. To many viewers, the message seemed obvious. Here was a billionaire choosing the same breakfast enjoyed by millions of ordinary people. It was a simple scene, relatable and unpretentious, reinforcing the image of a business leader who had never become disconnected from everyday life. Then another photograph surfaced. What appeared to be a quiet breakfast was surrounded by professional cameras, photographers, and a production team carefully documenting the moment from multiple angles. The image that millions believed was spontaneous suddenly looked carefully orchestrated. The illusion was broken in an instant, not by an investigative journalist or a competing company, but by the innocent observation of a child walking past the scene. Looking at the crowd gathered around one man eating breakfast, the student simply remarked that there were so many people taking pictures of someone having breakfast. Sometimes, a single honest observation reveals more than pages of analysis ever could. Many public figures might have denied the situation or attempted to explain it away. Lei Jun chose a different response. Rather than distancing himself from the criticism, he acknowledged the reality of modern communication. In today's interconnected world, he suggested, maintaining a strong and relatable public image inevitably involves cameras, publicity, and conversation. Whether people praised the video or criticized it, the discussion itself became part of how a modern brand remains visible. It was an unusually candid response, one that shifted the conversation away from the breakfast itself and toward a broader question about authenticity in the digital age. That question extends far beyond one executive or one carefully filmed meal. Today's business leaders operate in an environment where visibility has become part of leadership. Customers expect access. Investors expect communication. Social media rewards moments that appear natural, even when significant planning lies behind them. The challenge is no longer simply whether someone lives modestly. It is whether modesty itself has become another form of storytelling. Lei Jun's experience reminds us that in the modern world, authenticity and public relations often exist side by side, making it increasingly difficult for observers to separate one from the other. Perhaps that is why this chapter feels different from every story before it. Zong Qinghou, Liu Yonghao, and Ren Zhengfei rarely seemed interested in drawing attention to their modest lifestyles. Their habits became known because others witnessed them over many years. Lei Jun's story, however, reflects a new reality where every public appearance has the potential to become part of a company's identity. His breakfast was never just breakfast. It became a conversation about image, authenticity, marketing, and the expectations society places on successful people. Rather than offering an easy conclusion, Lei Jun leaves us with an important question. When we admire the simplicity of influential people, are we seeing who they truly are, or are we seeing the image they hope we will remember? In an age where cameras are almost always present, the answer is not always obvious. Yet perhaps the more valuable lesson is not whether every moment is perfectly authentic, but remembering that appearances alone rarely tell the entire story. Chapter 5, Cao Dewang, the billionaire who believed wealth was never truly his. Among all the stories in this documentary, few are shaped as deeply by personal conviction as that of Cao Dewang, the founder of Fuyao Glass. His company grew into one of the world's largest manufacturers of automotive glass, supplying vehicles across continents and becoming a global leader in its industry. Yet despite overseeing an industrial empire worth billions of dollars, Cao's personal life followed a rhythm that resembled something far quieter. His daily routine reflected discipline, simplicity, and a belief that wealth carries responsibilities far beyond personal comfort. Each morning began in much the same way. Rising around 5 o'clock, Cao would start his day with a simple bowl of rice porridge, one of the most modest breakfasts imaginable. There were no elaborate meals prepared to celebrate success, no display of luxury to remind himself of what he had achieved. For many people, prosperity changes daily habits almost overnight. For Cao, those habits remained remarkably consistent regardless of how large his company became. His routine reflected a philosophy that discipline should not disappear simply because life becomes more comfortable. The roots of that discipline reach back to a childhood marked by extraordinary hardship. As a young boy, Cao's family endured severe poverty and fled famine in search of survival. Before entering manufacturing, he worked as a street vendor and later as a farmer, spending years performing physically demanding labor simply to make ends meet. Those experiences left permanent lessons. Anyone who has experienced genuine hunger rarely forgets what it feels like. Success may transform circumstances, but memories of hardship often remain powerful teachers long after the hardship itself has passed. Yet what makes Cao Dewang's story truly distinctive is not simply the modest way he lived. It is what he chose to do with the wealth he accumulated. Rather than viewing his fortune as something meant primarily for personal enjoyment, he donated billions of dollars to disaster relief, poverty alleviation, and educational initiatives throughout China. His generosity was not presented as an occasional act of charity, but as an extension of the same principles that guided his everyday life. The simplicity of his breakfast and the scale of his philanthropy were not separate ideas. They reflected the same understanding that resources carry purpose beyond individual consumption. Cao once described his philosophy in remarkably straightforward terms. He did not see his wealth as entirely his own. Instead, he viewed himself as a temporary steward, entrusted with resources that could serve a broader public good. It is a perspective that challenges one of the most common assumptions surrounding great fortunes. Society often measures wealth by what a person owns. Cao's life suggests another possibility: perhaps true wealth is measured by how responsibly it is managed while it is in one's care. Looking across his journey, it becomes clear that Cao Dewang never separated business success from personal responsibility. The same discipline that helped build one of the world's largest glass manufacturers also shaped the way he approached giving, leadership, and daily living. His story reminds us that prosperity does not have to lead toward greater excess. Sometimes it creates a greater opportunity to serve others. In Cao's case, the billions he earned were never the final achievement. They became tools through which he believed lasting good could be accomplished, leaving a legacy measured not only by factories and financial success, but by the lives his generosity sought to improve. Chapter 6: Wang Chuanfu, the billionaire who turned scarcity into innovation. Some entrepreneurs succeed because they have access to greater resources. Wang Chuanfu succeeded because he learned how to build without them. As the founder of BYD, Wang transformed a small battery manufacturer into one of the world's leading electric vehicle companies, eventually surpassing Tesla in global EV sales. His success placed him among China's wealthiest business leaders, yet his personal habits remained remarkably consistent with the values that shaped his earliest years. Even after building a multibillion-dollar enterprise, Wang continued to live and work with a simplicity that surprised many who expected a more traditional image of corporate success. Visitors to BYD headquarters often notice something unusual. The company's founder is frequently seen wearing the same blue factory uniform as the employees working on the production floor. He eats in the company cafeteria alongside engineers, technicians, and assembly workers rather than in a private executive dining room. On several occasions, Wang and his wife have even been photographed using public transportation to attend major automotive events, quietly riding the subway like thousands of other commuters. For someone leading one of the world's most valuable automotive companies, these choices were never about convenience. They reflected a leadership style that emphasized shared purpose over visible status. The origins of that philosophy can be traced back to a childhood shaped by hardship. Wang was born in 1966 into a farming family, and tragedy struck early when he lost both of his parents during his teenage years. His older brother left school to work so that Wang could continue his education, a sacrifice that changed the course of his life. Those years taught him that opportunity is often created through determination rather than circumstance. Every achievement carried the memory of someone else's sacrifice, making success feel less like personal entitlement and more like a responsibility to honor the people who helped make it possible. When Wang founded BYD in 1995, he faced a challenge that would have discouraged many entrepreneurs. The company lacked the capital needed to purchase the highly automated manufacturing equipment used by established competitors. Rather than accepting defeat, Wang approached the problem differently. He carefully studied advanced Japanese production methods and redesigned them into processes that could be performed manually by skilled workers. What appeared to be a disadvantage became one of BYD's greatest competitive strengths. Instead of allowing limited resources to define what was impossible, he used ingenuity to create an entirely different path forward. This approach eventually became part of BYD's culture. Every dollar invested was expected to create value. Every process was examined for efficiency. Waste was viewed not simply as unnecessary spending, but as a missed opportunity to innovate. Wang's personal frugality mirrored the same discipline found throughout the company. It was never about denying comfort for its own sake. It was about ensuring that resources were directed toward building better products rather than supporting unnecessary extravagance. In many ways, the careful stewardship of money became just as important as the technology itself. Looking back, Wang Chuanfu's story offers a lesson that extends well beyond business. Scarcity is often viewed as a limitation, something to overcome as quickly as possible. Yet throughout history, some of the greatest innovations have emerged precisely because people were forced to think differently when resources were limited. Wang did not simply survive those limitations, he transformed them into an advantage that helped reshape one of the world's most competitive industries. His journey reminds us that while capital can accelerate success, resourcefulness often determines whether success is possible in the first place. Chapter 7, Niu Gensheng, the billionaire who gave away his fortune. Every story we've explored so far has shown a billionaire who chose to live with remarkable restraint despite possessing extraordinary wealth. Niu Gensheng took that philosophy one step further. He did not simply live modestly while building a successful company. After creating one of China's largest dairy businesses, he made a decision that surprised even those who admired his discipline. He chose to give away the ownership of the company he had spent his life building. It was an act that transformed his story from one of personal frugality into one of lasting stewardship. Before that historic decision, however, the signs of his character were already visible in everyday life. Niu became known for wearing an inexpensive necktie that reportedly cost less than $3. His travel arrangements remained modest, and he consistently avoided unnecessary luxury regardless of how valuable his company became. These choices were never presented as acts of self-denial. Instead, they reflected a principle he believed every leader should embrace. If a company's employees are expected to eliminate waste and spend responsibly, then those expectations must begin with the people leading the organization. Credibility, in his view, could never be separated from personal example. That philosophy influenced the culture of his business. Every expense was treated with care, not because the company lacked resources, but because discipline at the top creates confidence throughout an organization. Employees notice whether executives follow the same standards they ask others to practice. A leader who demands sacrifice while living extravagantly sends one message. A leader who quietly accepts the same discipline sends another. Niu believed that lasting corporate efficiency begins with personal responsibility, making his modest lifestyle less about saving money and more about reinforcing trust within the company itself. Then came the decision that set him apart from nearly everyone else on this list. Rather than passing his ownership to future generations or holding it indefinitely as personal wealth, Niu transferred his entire ownership stake in Mengniu Dairy to a charitable trust. It was an unprecedented move in modern Chinese business, creating a structure through which the value generated by the company could continue supporting social and environmental causes long into the future. The fortune he spent decades building would continue serving purposes beyond his own lifetime. Such a decision requires a very different understanding of success. Many entrepreneurs spend their lives building companies with the hope of securing financial freedom for themselves and their families. Niu certainly understood the importance of creating wealth, yet he also believed that wealth carries obligations. By placing his life's work into a charitable trust, he demonstrated that the ultimate value of success may not lie in how much a person possesses, but in how much good those achievements continue to create for others after they are gone. Looking back, the inexpensive necktie and the charitable trust tell the same story. Neither was about appearing humble. Both reflected a consistent philosophy that leadership begins with personal discipline and reaches its highest purpose through service. Niu Gensheng reminds us that building a fortune is an extraordinary achievement, but deciding what that fortune should accomplish after it has been earned may be an even greater one. Chapter 8, Li Ka-shing, the billionaire who measured wealth by what it could build. If the stories we've heard so far have shown that discipline can survive success, Li Ka-shing brings that lesson to its highest expression. For decades, he has been recognized as one of Asia's most accomplished investors and entrepreneurs, building a business empire that spans ports, telecommunications, retail, infrastructure, and real estate. At various points, his personal fortune exceeded $36 billion, making him one of the wealthiest individuals on the continent. Yet despite possessing resources beyond imagination, Li's personal life remained remarkably restrained, reflecting habits that had been formed long before prosperity entered his life. One of the most well-known examples of his simplicity was something many people wear every day without a second thought: a watch. For years, Li chose to wear an inexpensive $50 Seiko, even though he could have purchased virtually any luxury timepiece in the world. When he eventually replaced it, he selected a modest citizen watch, not because it was fashionable, but because it was durable, practical, and powered by solar energy. His decisions were guided by usefulness rather than prestige. To him, a watch existed to tell time, not to announce wealth. The same philosophy could be seen in the place he called home. Rather than continuously seeking larger estates or more extravagant residences, Li continued living in the same property overlooking Deepwater Bay that he had purchased decades earlier during the 1960s. While the home was renovated over the years, he never treated success as a reason to constantly pursue bigger symbols of achievement. In a world where growing fortunes often produce ever-growing lifestyles, Li demonstrated an unusual sense of contentment. Success did not require constant replacement of what already served its purpose. Those choices become far more meaningful when viewed alongside his early life. During the Second World War, Li's family fled mainland China in search of safety. Not long afterward, his father died of tuberculosis, leaving the family in extremely difficult circumstances. At just 15 years old, Li left school and began working 16-hour days in a plastics factory to help support those around him. While many teenagers were still receiving an education, he was learning lessons about responsibility, sacrifice, and survival. Those experiences shaped the way he viewed opportunity for the rest of his life. Money was never something to be wasted because he had lived through a time when even the smallest amount could determine whether a family endured another day. Yet perhaps the most remarkable chapter of Li Ka-shing's story is found not in what he kept, but in what he chose to give away. Through the Li Ka-shing Foundation, he pledged approximately one-third of his personal wealth, supporting education, healthcare, scientific research, and humanitarian initiatives around the world. He once referred to the foundation as his third son, a description that reflected the importance he placed on its mission. Rather than seeing philanthropy as something separate from business success, Li viewed it as one of its highest purposes. Wealth, in his eyes, reached its greatest value when it created opportunities for others long after it had been earned. Looking across his extraordinary journey, it becomes clear that Li Ka-shing's legacy cannot be measured solely by the companies he built or the fortune he accumulated. Those achievements are impressive in their own right, but they are only part of the story. The inexpensive watch, the familiar home, the disciplined lifestyle, and the commitment to philanthropy all point toward the same enduring principle: wealth is most meaningful when it serves a purpose beyond the individual who possesses it. For Li, success was never about collecting symbols of prosperity. It was about building something that would continue improving lives long after he was gone. As this documentary comes to a close, one pattern emerges across every story. These 8 individuals built fortunes that few people will ever imagine, yet none of them allowed wealth to redefine who they were. Their industries were different. Their personalities were different. Their journeys were different. But they shared one uncommon belief: money is a powerful tool, but character remains far more valuable than anything money can buy.
The fortune they never lost. When most people imagine extraordinary wealth, they picture the things money can buy: mansions overlooking the ocean, collections of luxury cars, private aircraft waiting on the runway, watches worth more than a family's lifetime earnings. For many, these symbols have become the definition of success itself. Yet, the lives we've explored tell a remarkably different story. Here were 8 individuals who possessed the financial freedom to own almost anything they desired, and yet, many deliberately chose not to. Their greatest achievement was never the simplicity of their possessions. It was the discipline of their character. Although each journey was unique, a common thread connected them all. Zong Qinghou never forgot the value of every dollar he earned. Liu Yonghao remained rooted in the habits of a farmer, even after building an agricultural empire. Ren Zhengfei believed leadership was demonstrated through shared experience rather than privilege. Lei Jun reminded us that in today's connected world, authenticity and public image are often intertwined. Cao Dewang viewed wealth as something entrusted to him, rather than owned by him. Wang Chuanfu transformed scarcity into innovation. Niu Gensheng believed that success carried a responsibility to give back. Li Ka-shing demonstrated that perhaps the greatest legacy of wealth is not what we accumulate, but what we leave behind for others. It is also important to recognize what these stories are not saying. They are not arguing that wealth is wrong, nor do they suggest that success requires rejecting comfort or living without enjoyment. Every one of these entrepreneurs spent decades building businesses, creating jobs, taking risks, and generating enormous economic value. Their lives remind us that prosperity itself is not the problem. The question is whether prosperity begins to own the person who earned it. Money is an extraordinary tool, but it is a poor master. The moment possessions begin defining identity, they quietly take control of the very freedom wealth was supposed to provide. Perhaps that is why these stories continue to resonate across generations. They are not really about billionaires. They are about choices. Every one of us, regardless of income or circumstance, decides what deserves our attention, our time, and our values. Character is not reserved for the wealthy. Discipline is not purchased with success. Humility does not appear automatically when a fortune is made. These qualities are built long before achievement arrives, and if they are genuine, they often remain long after success changes everything else. As you reflect on these remarkable lives, consider this question. If tomorrow brought you extraordinary success, what part of yourself would you refuse to lose? Your habits? Your integrity? Your generosity? Your appreciation for simple things? History suggests that the people who make the greatest impact are often the ones who protect those qualities most carefully. They understand that fortunes can rise and fall, markets can change, and industries can be transformed. But a reputation built on integrity, discipline, and humility becomes a legacy that outlives every balance sheet. If you enjoyed this journey through the lives of some of Asia's most remarkable entrepreneurs, you found a community that believes history is more than a collection of dates and fortunes. It is a collection of lessons waiting to be discovered. Here on Unchartered Decision, we explore the lives, decisions, and philosophies of extraordinary people. Not simply to admire their success, but to understand the timeless principles that shaped it. If that's the kind of journey you want to continue, subscribe to the channel and join us for the next story. Until then, thank you for listening, and remember, the greatest fortune any person can build is a character that success can never buy and failure can never take away.